Welcome everyone to finally an update this busy week, and a video I wanted to make for quite some weeks already is here an update on this, my last Retina MacBook Pro, not making this up, 2013, so pretty old age by now, 6 years nearly or something of that sort. You've seen this in my previous videos. Certainly new Macs we can't recommend, failing keyboards and whatnot, sold out SSD and whatnot. But here on this channel, on previous videos, we swapped the SSD on this one, and for testing I now have, because I needed more space, so I brought this with 500 gigabytes. That was the top of the line, and I once, after 3 or 4 years, I went to Apple here, said, hello, here, take my cache. I need more storage for YouTube editing and such, and they said, no, we don't change it to any other model. If it would be failing, you would get exactly the same, but we will not give you an upgrade. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Apple. So on this video, with an adapter, this is of course proprietary. Here, previous videos, tiny 6 to 16 bucks or something from eBay or Alibaba or Amazon or wherever. Not sponsored advertisement. You get this very small PCB and you can plug in there any other M.2 SSD here, previous videos. So this SSD, of course, here for testing, I have here in this, also probably should have switched the scene because why not. Razer Core X also here, previous videos. We use this here for testing, running virtual machines, reverse engineering, PCI driver development, you name it. And to use this SSD, so 500 gigabyte, of course not too bad, and you also get an adapter for that. That is of course the Apple SSD, by the way, fun fact, Samsung, right? The good old best stuff from Samsung. This similar adapter PCB thing and the wheel thing, so that is SSD proprietary to M.2 there. Another 6 to 16 bucks there. You see not only on USB cables but even on PCIe, Apple, the life with dongles and adapters. And then of course here on an M.2 carrier thing, that is a passive, also another 16. So you guessed it, also I fixed this here slightly. Everything, even, well, not everything, aftermarket third-party stuff on eBay and Whatnot is 16 bucks. And you see the flexibility. I did not get this for eGPUs, but actually previous videos for all this driver development and stuff. Let's hope this doesn't fall here somewhere. So yeah, and one more final shot. So that is that even not entirely focused? You get the idea. And yeah, Samsung not making this up. This is the original Apple one. So just to give you an idea of how the situation is here with adapters and dongles and how you can use it. Also, of course, this is not yet dead, so you can continue with this adapter, use it, Apple stuff. After upgrades, continue to use it in servers and whatnot. I wanted to share you some data point. The point of this video here actually is mostly here the smart data about the wear leveling, because most of you probably know that SSDs have a limited lifespan. Also plenty of articles on the web, because all these flash cells can only be written 1,000 times or something. So what this controller is doing, so the main point beside bridging protocols here of this controller is actually also doing wear leveling, meaning not always writing to the same logical address, but spreading the writes out over all of those flash cells to increase the lifetime. Otherwise, I personally never had such an SSD failing yet. However, I had plenty of USB sticks and SD cards failing on me. And so there you see on those entry-level devices, USB, thumb drives and SD cards, no wear leveling, meaning if you use a regular file system and write like PS3 or you copy stuff in your office, then after a year or two, if you use it every day, then eventually the SSD, this USB thumb drive will be defect. There are, however, most people also don't know, there are some high endurance something pro, professional something, but reads the fine print. Some higher quality professional USB thumb drives actually have a wear leveling controller like this. So what do they write here? So wear leveling, of course, by the way, one fun fact, if you Google this, you get here a nice picture here, like wear leveling, like, actually this is, why is this industrial.com? Anyway, you get the idea instead of, at least here from the very tiny thumbnail, instead of always writing the same, like imagine you have a file, like a Word file or OpenOffice file or a machine learning file, and if on a regular classic file system like X3 or 4 or Riser or XFS, BetterFS, ZFS, you name it, without wear leveling and updating the same file, the content would be always written to the same magnetic rotating storage or flash cells, and the wear leveling is spreading it out. Fun fact, I clicked here on this Wikipedia article before the live stream and the graphic is not here, maybe caching, whatever. But so yeah, if you want to read about more details, what they write in this article is that the mean time between failure, for example, for a 250 gigabyte SSD is, by the way, the larger, the bigger the SSD, the more you can write to it, because you of course spread the same amount of writes to a larger number of flash cells. That is why for a smaller SSD it is less terabytes written, and for a larger SSD it's then like twice the capacity, like maybe twice the gigabytes written. So they write here 60 to 150 terabytes written, something of that sort. And when we take a look on the smart data, so of course you get this with smart control on Linux or macOS or wherever. Also T2 package obviously in our Linux, and these are this kind of values you get, power on hours. So you see, I actually thought I trashed this SSD quite a lot. This was my main machine for, was actually still is today, because certainly not buying a new Apple. And I developed software, I virtual machines, tested stuff, I scanned plenty of documents, image processing, additional operating system installs, like for testing, you name it. So I'm actually surprised after 5, 6, maybe nearly 6 years soon, it is still relatively okay. And you see power on hours and power cycles, actually quite some power cycles, certainly with all the suspend and resume cycles, I guess. And except here this one unknown attribute, Apple also here, amazing standards, right? Unknown Apple attributes, no, whatever. So the host reads, so the modern SSDs, and fun fact, even some or more rotating, spinning hard drive storage counts in the firmware the total megabytes written and read, and you see here this is this, and when we follow here, this divides this from megabytes to gigabytes and then to terabytes. I'm here around 42 written, so 42 terabyte written. That is, so yeah, it's not yet failing, so just wanted to give some data point for what I would mostly consider a power user. So there are certainly like pure office without, also later initially I developed, later with this YouTube channel I edited YouTube videos on this, and I would have thought with all this video editing also quite some additional terabytes written. And yeah, so power user, 500 gigabyte SSD, Samsung, 5 to 6 years in. Of course you can trash it even more, so not only if you intentionally constantly write data on it, or if you are only video editing. Certainly my first 4 years of software development, maybe not the heaviest duty, but just to give you some idea. And yeah, I have not yet really monitored how accurate this data is. Maybe I should check this with some other things. Also the wear leveling count, what I don't like the most is actually here this value in most stuff. Each time I wonder what exactly this was. I also didn't find here this unknown Apple attribute thing. I only found here some googling of SSD smart failure false alarm. Someone on the Apple forum of all forums wrote here 169 unknown attribute. That is exactly this here. And he has here indeed failing now, so always so an even higher number, so much to, or at least I think it's even higher, maybe. Anyway, so you see on the original official Apple forum, some people apparently used it even more, maybe video editor, something of that sort, and eventually they really fail, so not making this up. And I think there is not really is a follow-up. Oh, there's a little bit, whatever. What I actually should have Googled is this wear leveling count, how those values, because what I always wonder is how those values here are to be interpreted. Of course, temperature. So value worst is, but even this here, 68, I mean, here is min max, so temperature 32, min max, so minimum 9, maximum 64, and here is value 68, so whatever. I wish this would be a little bit more user-friendly. Welcome Christian, so maybe one final Googling here of what this value is exactly. At least it's not yet when failed, failing now, like on others here on the Apple forum. If you have any data points to SSDs, leave me in the comments below. So far, but I have also to say I am a little bit late to the SSD game. Back in the day when they were new over a decade ago, 15 years or something, so like 2005 or something, I actually did not buy any of the first generation SSDs because in 2005 or whenever that was, everyone was like, yeah, they were failing. Maybe the flash cells not yet as amazing, maybe the wear leveling not yet as advanced. And so the first or maybe even most of the second generation SSDs back in the 2000 somethings I skipped. Maybe this is why I have no SSD failures here except USB thumb drives and SD cards. And all of the modern stuff like either M.2 or Cyril ATE has not yet failed on me here on vintage Unix workstations and Sun Ultra 5 and stuff. Maybe we should also actually pre-failed condition. What is here? Pre-type pre-fail, old age pre-fail. Whatever. Yeah, you see other people also wonder. So if you have any indications, I earlier already info smart. Let's take a quick look because I slightly wonder. That would be min max. Do they have this documented? I think at least it was min max, wasn't it? A value worst, nah. Each attribute also has a worst value shown under the heading worst. That is the smallest, closest to failure value that the disk has reported at any time during its lifetime when Smart was enabled. Each attribute also has a threshold value ranging from 0 to 255, which is printed under the heading threshold. If the normalized value is less than or equal to the threshold value, then the attribute is said to have failed. So less than or equal to the threshold value. So this is normalized, unknown, so less than or equal. So probably, as far as I guess, this would be, the threshold is 100 and it would go down, so there is 84 left and here is like 243 left. Anyway, I wish a little bit this would be a little bit more readable here, this value worth threshold something, but yeah, of course on rotating storage I had here, of course, not only pending sector count here, currently pending sector count, that is of course when you have read and write errors on rotating magnetic storage, and also this reallocated sector count here, also actually the defect mapping that good old-fashioned rotating storage is doing, so that just that you have an indication. Also, we had the previous video of this shingled magnetic recording stuff, also not the most amazing, and that also for the write speeds not the most amazing, and that there on those, I think, Seagate drives or something, some of them were auto parking the heads excessively. So I actually previous video a year ago, if you have some of those drives that are like parking the heads very often, like every minute or so, and your Unix file system journaling kicks in, you might get a very high load count, like parking and moving those heads, and this can destroy the drive also early, within 6 or 12 months. And within some days I had there already like 6,000 load cycles over a couple of nights with the Seagate drive. So if you have this previous video, you might want to disable some power management head parking feature to prolong the life of your NAS storage in the corner. I hope you learned something, at least here's some data. I will eventually, so right now I keep it as backup, but in a couple of weeks or months I will most likely use it, because 500 working gigabyte, although it is AHCI, so serial ATA, not the most amazing, but yeah, it's Apple. Of course, they have not installed the most amazing back in the day. And yeah, not the highest performance nowadays, but hey, 500 gigabyte still working, not too bad. For sure, I will plug this into whatever nice system I find here and reuse it until it fails apart. If it ever stops working, which might be sometime in some vintage system or something, not really sure. If I plug it into a server, you could of course with SSD caching or something. If I ever have an update of a failing SSD, I will keep you posted. Otherwise, I hope you learned something. Let's see, managed to kill a Christian writes here, killed a Corsair Force 2, one of the early M.2 SanDisk SSDs. May they rest in peace. Okay, interesting. You say early. Also, yes, some I purchased Intel, so some like SanDisk. I think the SD card that failed was a SanDisk, and in general, I only purchased Samsung and Intel SSDs. I think for the most part, except the upgrade for the MacBook, but that will be a story for another day. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned something. I hope that helps people to get an understanding. Oh, by the way, last. One more thing. On Twitter, I sometimes wrote to people who, the usual Apple fanboys, like MacBook is amazing. I usually, or sometimes I'm well, programming it, right? But if I have Twitter open, some stuff of this scrolls by, I sometimes answered, hey, this is really not amazing. This is soldered down. Also, by the way, what is killing Apple to have this exchangeable modules, right? I hope it's visible somewhat. Of course, the pure module there is just a tiny thing on this stack of PCIe, M.2 and Apple adapter stack of goodness. So usually I say to people, don't buy this new Macs, and then Apple fanboys tell me, yeah, you know what, this SSDs last forever. Well, one data point I stand somewhat a little bit corrected in. Yes, my own SSD has survived so far. However, imagine I would have this 3,000 euro Mac, which is still usable, and now the SSD would fail, right? Would be totally not amazing. And you see here that this fails for people, right? It's not so, I'm not the greatest power user, which also, by the way, fun fact, I have here other systems, right? So for testing, I used also another, you have seen in previous videos, other old MacBooks or Mac Pro, or maybe even G5 or SGI Octane, or have fun with the PS3. If I would have only used this as my only machine, maybe the SSD would already in 5 or 6 years be defect. But from this point of view, yes, it lasts 5 or 6 years, even for a power user. Sometimes your mileage may vary, but it also fails for some people, like you see here on the Apple forum, and from plenty of people, of friends and family, probably already heard that some SSD failed on them. And that is why, in general, even if it lasts 5 or 6 years, I would not buy into this new MacBooks here of newer than this vintage kind, because I do not want to throw away a Mac of 2,000 or 3,000 euro value. Of course, after 5 years, it's not as much value, but given how much people want to spend for Macs, and maybe even mine is going up in value for, you know, not soldered components, not broken, well, mostly not broken keyboard and other fun stuff. So yeah, maybe for the most part goes up in value because the new Macs are so not amazing. But yeah, this is why, yes, it survived, but do you really want to throw away a logic board? And it's just fact, right? Apple is doing this intentionally. They basically save no space. You can't tell me that with a CPU cooler and whatnot and battery, you cannot put in there 2mm or 1 or 2mm of SSD. Also, if they wanted to be really cool, like attention to detail cool, they could even cut out the PCB, right, to have this still pluggable. If they would be a really amazing, outstanding company with attention to detail, you could make this in a form factor and not consuming any extra space if you would solder this connector, this M.2 connector, at the edge of a PCB, have there cut out a hole in the PCB and still without any loss of thinness have this amazing, but yeah, maybe anyway. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned something. If you have any comments, leave them below, and I hope to see you soon for the next videos and updates to come.